years ago, my family and I lived in Istanbul, Turkey. I worked there as an English teacher at a state university. My students were engineering students who had learned English over the years in class, but really hadn't had much opportunity to practice it. My job was to make them practice. I genuinely enjoyed my work with the students. I found them to be the brightest of the university and probably the brightest of the whole country. They were sincere, motivated, and a lot of fun to be with. Virtually all of them were Muslim. They represented a country that is statistically 99.9% Muslim. Because of my goal to encourage them to speak English, I urged the students to speak on any topic that they wanted to. No topic is off limits in this class, I would tell them, but then encourage them further, but you have to say it in English. They took me at my word, and the result was enjoyable. It was freewheeling, and it was often a heated time of discussion. As you might imagine, religion became a frequent go-to in our conversations. The students assumed that since I was American, that I was a Christian. They were unaware that America had a bit different regard toward religion as they did, being a secular democratic country. For most of them, I was the first serious Christian they had ever met, and so they saw me as a challenge to evangelize someone who, according to their religion, was an infidel. On my part, I was just as eager to tell them about my faith. To facilitate these conversations, I had an idea. Let me group several terms together that have to do with religion or theology and have them available so that when we were speaking on that subject, they wouldn't lose their flow of conversation by having to search for some word that both of us would have to do sign language or whatever was necessary so we would understand each other. You know, words like grace, sin, death, life, simple words which are very much part of our religious vocabulary. So I would insert one of those words as they were trying to make a point, and then they could just go on. And they always felt like they were really great in their English, not knowing that I had really supplied some important words so they could continue their conversation. Often our conversation would end with one of them saying something like this: "You know, it's no use. Things won't change. Of course, you're a Christian because you grew up in America. If you'd been born in Turkey, you would be a Muslim." How does one argue with that sort of a statement? Of course, these students didn't know, as I've told you earlier, that it isn't inevitable that someone might be a Christian simply because they were born in America. Not every family is Christian, but many of us have been born into a Christian home. I'm one of them. Let's call ourselves accidental Christians. It's a term used by Christian writer J. Warner Wallace. What he means by this is to say that some of us have been, as a result of birth, born into something that we believe is the truth. In a sense, we were lucky. And so, just by being born in the family, we can have the name Christian. And many of us, never consider any other alternative. Now, such a reality can raise deep questions about the whys. For example, why did I just fall into the truth while others go through a lifetime of struggle to find it? For that question, the best thing I can do is to listen what God's perspective is. Where in the book of Acts, Paul says this to the Greeks: "From one man, God, made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out and find him, though he is not far from any one of us." For our benefit, however, I think there's a more important question we can ask. What am I going to do with this knowledge of the truth that was just given to me? I would suggest two things. First of all, we must subject that gift to the scrutiny that I would require of anyone else from a different religion. The question, is it true? How do I know it's true? What do I really believe? Does my truth withstand a rigorous test? Do I believe that Christianity is true just because it was handed to me? Or do I believe it because I have searched it out and proven that it is true? In a few words, I must own it. Such a pursuit will change our standing from an accidental Christian to an evidential Christian. We may end up with the same conclusion we started out with. But now we have a reason for being a Christian. We have worked it out in our thoughts and our lives. Secondly, having done the work, we can give the good news to those who didn't just fall into the true way, but who are in the process of seeking God and perhaps reaching for Him and finding Him. If we do this, those we interact with might learn, as we have learned, that He is not far from us. So in summary, how do we change from being an accidental Christian to an evidential one? Well, we do vigorous study to know what we believe. We challenge our beliefs with honest questioning, and we hold tight to what we have found to be true. If we do this, we will always be ready to give an answer to anyone who asks us to give a reason for the hope that is in us.